Everyone. Opening of the meeting at 8 a.m., ouverture de la réunion à 8 heures. Bienvenue à la réunion d'aménagement du territoire. Welcome to the Planning Standing Committee meeting of November 27th. Est-ce qu'il y a des intérêts pécuniaires? Aucune? Any disclosure pecuniary interest? Adoption of the agenda. Que l'ordre du jour soit adopté tel que présenté, that the agenda be adopted as presented. Can I get a mover and seconder? Moved and seconded by Mayors Riopel and Brière. Any changes to it? I think we'll be removing item 4.2 if all those are in favor for the time being. On enlève item 4.2. Mover and seconder to remove that item. Well, it's just you both, so that's fine. We're going to be pretty easy. All those in favor? Motion carried. 4.1. Proposed consent application of County Road 16, Mr. John Lyons. Proposition de morcellement en bordure du chemin de Comté 16, Monsieur John Lyons. C'est à vous, Monsieur Prévost.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of council. Just before Mr. Lyons does his presentation, I just wanted to do an introduction. Basically, while all the information is in Mr. Lyons' documentation that he submitted that you have in your agenda for this morning. So just to summarize the situation, Mr. Lyons owns a property just north of the former village of Lemieux on County Road 16. He wants to sever a piece of property. However, the frontage is not sufficient in accordance with the county official plan, which requires a 100-meter frontage minimum for the creation of a new lot. So Mr. Lyons is just short of that. So we had several discussions and email exchanges and explained the situation to Mr. Lyons. And I also suggested that I could meet the planning committee to discuss this matter. So, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you, Mr. Prévost, and to the planning committee members. I really appreciate the opportunity to present the situation. If we could start the slideshow. Yeah, so I think maybe there's, oh, okay, that's the Word document. So looking for the PowerPoint slideshow, actually. And there we go. Down a little further with one more. There we go. Oh, I'm not sure what happened to PowerPoint exactly. So thank you for clarifying that this is a consent application. I wasn't sure how to describe it exactly. What I'm looking for is agreement in principle to sever the property that's described there. Subject, of course, to further consultations, hydrogeological survey, and natural wildlife, whatever might be prescribed. If you could advance to the second slide, I appreciate it. This describes where it's located, yeah, a little bit east or north of Lemieux, focused in here on the specific property. On the right side of the image, descending downwards, sort of to the bottom right, is Dixon Factory Road, and across the top is Road 16, which I've underlined as Road 16, and at the frontage you see that there's roughly 150 meters, at least as measured by a la carte, and it's about 660 meters deep. So it's 1/4 of lot 21. The obstacle is, as Mr. Prévost has mentioned, official county official plan 3.3.5 minor collector policies that requires a minimum frontage of 100 meters for the creation of a new lot, and whichever lot would be retained, and I only have 150 meters in total. So would like to divide them into two 75-meter frontages if possible. If you could advance, please. Thank you. So this is focusing on the plan. The two, both the yellow and the red rectangles combined represent the current property. And my intention, my hope, is to be able to sever it in this manner into two parcels. The green dashed line towards the front represents a single laneway that, and the intended purchaser of the red portion is my cousin or second cousin here, Matthew Bradley. And the idea is that we would share a single driveway from Road 16. So we would essentially achieve the objective, I believe, of separating laneways along the collector road by not having two laneways, but having a single one. I think that's pretty straightforward. The final line that I mentioned is, when I purchased the property 5 years ago and had an initial conversation with Guylain Laflèche, he, congratulated me on a nice property, and he said, "Oh, and with 45 meters frontage required, you could divide it into 3 lots." I'm not a developer. I didn't think much beyond that. I was waiting for things to evolve, and only learned after the fact about the implementation of the new county official plan, which then would not allow me to sever it into 3 lots. I never had the intention of 3 lots, but I would like to sever it into 2. In this slide, I've sort of led with the question, who would want this view? This is taken from above the property looking north towards the Nation River, as you can see in the insert on the right-hand side. And of course, a boy who grew up right across the road, my cousin Matthew, would love to have this view. It's kind of his dream to be able to build a home on the ridge there. Meanwhile, I live in London, Ontario, and it's important to me to keep this land in the property, or this in the family rather. Several years ago, it occurred to me that between myself, my 6 siblings, and my cousin, 8 of us, on the death of our aunt and mother, who had inherited the property from our grandparents, that the likelihood was it would be just sold, and the money collected. But I would really like to keep it in the family for sort of to honor an ancestral legacy, as I've identified there, and really to balance the notion of conservation, which is a high priority, I understand, for the county and in the official plan. Balance this natural conservation with some active stewardship, as opposed to it being just lying fallow, as it has for, I think, about 80 years or so, since 1939. If you wouldn't mind advancing the slide. So this is a view from the opposite view, looking south at the lot. And you might not be able to tell, but in the first 100 meters or so, it rises 11 meters, so 35 feet. And it's quite wet land along that ridge. The green highlighted portion just inside the red rectangle represents the historical lane, which I've cleared within the last few years for the purposes of ATVs and walking, but we haven't developed a proper laneway. But the intention would be to recreate or reestablish that laneway with more conducive to appropriate standards for construction and so on. And that Matthew would build a house on the ridge in that left triangle, and that I would retain the yellow triangle as a managed forest. Might put a small, sort of a seasonal building in there to allow me to come and camp out for a few days and work on the woodlot, but not much more. So by doing this, I mean, in theory, there is a twin lot just to the right-hand side, to the right of the yellow triangle, which is also 150 meters. And it's owned by a Gary Shane, who's a little bit more distant cousin. But in theory, we could probably take 2 150-meter frontage lots, combine them into 3, except that would likely imply 3 access lanes onto County Road 16, whereas the plan that I'm suggesting is really going to restrict it forever into, at most, 2. There's also the issue that the topography itself really doesn't lend itself to many access laneways because of that steep hill and the wet frontage. So reusing or reestablishing that historical laneway seems to make the most sense and would have the least impact, I think, on the land. If you wouldn't mind advancing, please, thank you. So a little bit of a history here. I had set this up to build a little bit, so it's a lot of information in one page. Consulted this history of the Shane family, identified up top there, Maurice Shane and Margaret Burns, or Mary Burns rather. Also Curran, Saint-Quentin, and reflections of the South Nation watershed. This is filled with information about our family, our families. I wanted to point out that if you take the original Shane family that received their location ticket here in Lordignal in 1817, I believe a year after the land registry office was established and just a couple of years after the surveying of this county had been complete. And they had 6 children. Morris Jr. Is kind of, if you follow the blue line on the top left, he had a daughter, Mary Ann Shane, who married a Henry Bradley. They had several children. I've just identified the ones that are kind of relevant here. So John Bradley and Gary Bradley in blue, Arthur, who is Matthew's grandfather, and Hazel, who was my grandmother. The Shane family also had a son, John, who had a son, Walter, who had a son, John Shane, and he married my grandmother. So my grandfather and grandmother were, in effect, second cousins, once removed. My mother was born Kathleen Shane, married Charles Lyons, and that's where I fit in. So you can see that Matthew and I are pretty close related in this respect. In the course of reviewing some of the details, I found out something interesting, that in fact, if you look at Mary Ann Shane and Walter Shane being cousins, their parents were, of course, siblings. It turns out that Henry Bradley, and I'm sorry I don't have Walter Shane, my great-grandmother's name beside it, her name was Mary Landrigan. They were also first cousins. Their mothers were a couple girls by the family of Terry that came from Tipperary in Ireland. So my grandmother and grandfather, Bradley and Shane, are actually related along 2 different lines. They are double second cousins, twice removed. The point that I wanted to make is that this really has been a pretty close-knit family in this part of the county. If you wouldn't mind advancing the slide, please. So this is a view of the properties owned over the years, over the last 150 years or so, among the Bradleys and Shanes. In the bottom left, in blue, identify Henry Bradley and Mary Ann Shane, who were the parents of our grandparents. Our great-uncle John Bradley ended up inheriting that land, and that is the farm that largely was swept into the river with the landslide of 1991. So their son, Johnny's son, Gary, continues to farm there. He's got a 50-acre lot. Matthew's father, Pat Bradley, inherited the farm in Green from his father, Arthur, which contains not only the 100 acres on the north side of Concession Road, or of Road 16, but also at the corner of Dixon Factory Road and Road 16. The latter portion has been sold to Matthew's brother, Rodney, who's farming it currently. I've identified a couple little small green blocks. The one on the north side of the road is Matthew's. He lives there now. His sister, Amy, lives in the small green box. There's a little blue box over there, which is Jay Bradley, the son of Gary Bradley. The point is that the families have continued to live and work and cooperate in that area. The red farm, first of all, there's 100 acres. It's identified by dashed lines. That was sold after my grandmother died in 1987. It had been originally bought by my great-grandfather, Walter Shane, his father, in around 1850. Tragically, Walter Shane and his wife, so my great-grandparents, were killed when my grandfather was 12 years old, and his sister and brother were 9 and 5. And their aunt came to take care of them until my grandfather was able to manage that farm. So he had 100 acres on the floodplain of the river, basically, and this 25 acres that's sort of densely shaded in red, which is the existing lot that we're talking about now. That was retained by my mother and my aunt after my grandmother died, and was just sitting there. In fact, it had not been farmed since 1939 when my grandfather died. Sort of another tragedy. My mother was 9 years old a month after the Second World War began, when my father died. So my grandmother continued to manage the farm for another 50 years or so, and except that she chose not to do anything with the 25 acres that parcel that we're speaking of now. It was too much for her to manage. So it was just, it laid fallow for those 50 years. I have noted in the bottom right, there's a couple of other families that are really sort of important participants in this valley now, the Franche family and the Valkenborgs. I tried to summarize that in the right-hand side here. This is 150 years of family commitment, really, to this area. What Matthew and I are trying to do represents an opportunity for sort of continued cooperation between our family, or within our family. And I've sort of raised the question that, I mean, it's 2 years too late in terms of the official plan, which I had no idea was coming. Bad on me, I suppose, but it is unfortunate that over the course of 150 years, 2 years could potentially make the difference based on this particular bylaw 3.3.5. I understand that you may be facing similar situations and that it might be difficult to reconcile a positive decision on this case with a negative one on other cases. And so I've tried to emphasize that what makes this special, I believe, is that there are cultural and historical implications in terms of the family, the history, and the continued cooperation, and that really the plan that Matthew and I have for it does support some of the other objectives of the official county plan in terms of preservation of natural habitat and so on. If I said here 50 meters from neighbor, there was a discussion I had with Monsieur Privot about expanding the frontage to 200 meters somehow by taking perhaps 50 meters from the lot to the east. But the problem is that it has some negative effects in terms of it's taking away farmland for no particular reason. And there would be the question as to how much depth would be required in order just to satisfy that 200-meter frontage. So it seems like sort of cutting off one's nose to spite their face, if I can use that expression. And I would hope that maybe we could come to an agreement that we could sever the lot with the 2 75-meter frontages. Tried to set it up in a way that would be as simple as possible, no complicated border lines, just split it right down the middle. That, again, I would hope is maybe more consistent with how the planning committee and the department would like things to operate. So I really appreciate your attention, the opportunity to present it to you today. Thank Matthew for being here as well. I would ask if he wants to add anything, he would. And I would be happy to take any questions from you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you.
I just want to go to planning. Could you maybe provide everyone with a little bit of context of why 200 meters is actually what we choose to have as a minimum requirement to sever land? Why that's important to in the official plan?
Mr. President, members of the committee, for those of Mr. Zant and Mr. Riopelli were present whenever we, I don't think Mr. Bria was in office at that point when we just completed the county official plan exercise 2 years ago. An extensive exercise was done to basically evaluate all the county roads to designation major, minor collectors, and also because of the fact that county council had just adopted an official plan amendment to allow more severances in the rural areas. It was decided by county council that 100-meter frontage on collector roads was the minimum to be able to get a severance. Mr. Bouchard is not here today, so he could add probably more information, but that's the exercise that was done, basically to ensure the integrity of the county road system to limit the amount of consent on county roads, basically with the minimum width of 100 meters. And also 50-meter road frontage was also decided for county roads along the Ottawa River. So there's a difference between the two. And I also wanted to point out that we had a situation exactly the same as what Mr. Lyons is requesting here today in Clarence Rockland whereby just before the City of Clarence-Rockland transferred over the Consent Approval Authority, approved a lot on County Road. I'm not sure which one, County Road 2? County Road 21, basically. And the proponent did not have the proper frontage. So the City of Clarence-Rockland approved the consent, and the counties filed an appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and a hearing was held, and the tribunal upheld the county's appeal. So basically, either you don't, or you have the frontage to be able to sever a lot on County Road.
Merci, Monsieur Prévost. Before I go back to you, Mr. Lyons, I just want to open it up to the committee members. Est-ce qu'il y a any questions and comments regarding this? Go ahead.
There's a reason why the official plan exists. There's a reason why it's advertised. And we never understand why people don't get involved. And this is a perfect example of why all of a sudden the light goes on, because now we want to create lots. We try and preserve as much as possible the agricultural zone. We try and preserve as much as possible the rural area. In this case, it's not really 100% agricultural, but it is recognized under the rural area. I don't have an issue in regards to the 75 meters. What I would have an issue with would be with the driveways. A shared driveways, we know down the road will create issues. You would have to have your own driveways if this board would allow you to go with the 75-meter lot. But according to the official plan, you would not be permitted. So it's basically like going to a minor variance hearing, and the board would decide. I'm puzzled between two now. I'm puzzled to the fact that this has been advertised. We change rules, and I know back in the days when Ghislain at the Nation told you that you could create 3 lots, maybe you should have acted on it. Damn if you do, damn if you don't, but we are here today. If the counties allow this, you'll have to create 2 driveways. That's my opinion. It's not going to be a shared driveway. That's my. I'll let my fellow mayor speak, but that would be my view.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Brière.
I am of the mind as well that the 75 meters is more than enough. I mean, that's 150 feet of frontage, in my opinion. As far as the driveways, I don't necessarily have a strong opinion as much as Mr. Riopel does, but if, depending on recommendations coming, what's better, 1 or 2, it'll be whatever the planning department decides. Now, as far as the number of these types of requests that come in, since we've changed the official plan, how many of these types of requests where we've had to separate and it doesn't fit the frontage, how many has come to us? Because this is our first time sitting as a committee. So how many of these types of applications come here, and what would be the future impact going forward if we do approve this? Like, is there going to be a flooding of people severing lots now because of this, or it's just that I'm worried about the precedent setting? That's one thing I do worry about. So how many applications of this sort came already, and that we've said no, or that we've said, and how many? There's no way to know the potential, but is this a precedent setting thing that we're creating more issues than we're trying to prevent? I don't know if that's the right wording.
Monsieur Prévost.
Mr. President of the committee, chair of the committee. Sorry, Mr. Brière. It's very hard to say how many have come in. Usually, there's a pre-consultation with the county staff or the municipal staff, and when we inform them that there's not sufficient frontage, usually applicants will just turn away and say, okay, well, I don't have proper frontage. So it's difficult to say, and I don't think we keep tabs, or maybe we do. I don't have the number to give you today. with regards to the precedent, it definitely would be a precedent setting. In this case, there's two options. Unless the official plan is modified to allow for this application to go through, reduce the frontage, it's not a question of, as Mr. Riopel mentioned, getting a minor variance. It's more complicated than that. Because you need the official plan basically indicates you need 100 meters unless otherwise you don't conform to the official plan. And unless the OP is changed or council wants to take on the responsibility of approving such a request, knowing full well that does not conform to the county official plan. Having said that, as I just mentioned, there is a precedent in Clarence-Rockland where we appealed and the tribunal upheld our appeal. So basically, it turned the city of Clarence-Rockland's decision. It turned down the city of Clarence decision. So if council wants to go that route, I would definitely caution council of possible legal actions from the proponent that basically spent several $1,000s to put forward an application and he lost. So I would caution council on this. Unless you modify the official plan, I would not recommend that council approve this consent application.
Merci, Monsieur Prévost. Yeah, follow up.
Now, as far as, again, from my understanding, it becomes it's about traffic, right? We want to try to reduce the amount of cars and things of the sort on those roads. I'm just questioning, again, I'm not the logic behind that, because if we are creating one more residence, we're talking a couple cars here and there daily. I don't think that's if that was the reason for creating this type of, I'll call it bylaw, or the logic behind this, I question the wisdom behind that, because again, if it's about traffic, we're in the middle of council, you know, this is so minimal that it's, the impact would be minimal. But I understand the precedent setting and the fact that going back on decisions is a dangerous thing that we have to be very aware of. But maybe going forward, is there something that we can maybe look to change these types of things? Again, again, if it's a traffic thing, I think this is definitely not something that impacts this area. I know it well.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Brière. Monsieur Riopel.
When I mentioned the minor variance had nothing to do with the official plan, I understand the official plan overrules everything, and I know that's the counties that has to decide. In regards to the 75 meters, it's 246 feet. If we were to create a new lot in the rural area, not in the agricultural area, they would request a minimum frontage of 45 meters, which is less than 75 feet, or 75 meters. So that's where my concern is not such as a high one in regards to, because it's not, is it zone agricultural or is it zone rural? Well, answers my question. I have no issues in regards to the issue of 75 meters. We would need to modify the official plan, but then again, if we're going to create an issue like Mr. Prévost has mentioned, then we're going to be opening a can of worms. So, like they say in English, eh? You know the saying, yeah? I'm not going to repeat it, but
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Lyons, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to emphasize that on this road of 1.2 kilometers, there's, I think, 4 culverts, but there's no active laneways off of it at all. So, and we would be more than willing to put 2 laneways in if as Mr. Riopel has mentioned, you know, that he foresees long-term difficulties with the idea of a shared driveway. The lawyers that we've consulted with have felt that shared driveways is a common enough thing that they're able to incorporate into deeds, and so we were thinking that was the best solution. I would kind of, you know, one option would be to come in off of Dixon Factory Road, but I don't think in my initial conversations with Monsieur Prévost about that, I don't think that that's really possible. I would hope that by comparison to the other case, which you know, raises the specter of dangerous precedent making here, that there really are other factors that are covered within and emphasized within the official plan, as I mentioned, related to culture and history and preservation of natural habitat. This is not, I'm not a developer. The intention was not to, build a bunch of houses or anything. It really is a matter of trying to preserve that family history and cooperation between us as family. And I do regret that I wasn't more attuned to the official plan arriving, but it was really just a matter of me thinking about family, the family land, the importance of that to me, approaching my mother and my aunt to be able to secure it so that it didn't get sold off and that we would be able to preserve that history, or that I would take the responsibility for doing that. And beyond that, I wasn't following closely, I guess, because I live in London. So it is unfortunate that I maybe missed the initial opportunity to sever it before the change in the official plan. But I do hope that these other factors could be and might be considered as in comparing the different cases. But I appreciate all of your comments very much. Can only hope for the best at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. I think we're in a situation here where it's clear, right? Everyone here, well, everyone, all three of us, if it was up to me, if you could build and sever, go ahead. I don't care. For the same reasons why I'd love to say that everyone can drive 120 on the 17, they can't. It's 90. Why? Because there's a law that says it's 90. Currently, we have a plan that says no. We can all vote against that plan. Mr. Prévost already said that would be appealed, and most likely they would win. Precedence has already been set in Clarence Rockland. The only option I see here is if council at one point wants to amend the official plan to permit these types of things. This would be a very healthy debate, I assume, with Public Works as well as planning, but it's not something that is completely out of the ordinary. At that point, once a decision is done, you'd be free to come back if that does pass, and then we'd be able to grant that. But right now, the plan says no, right? So unfortunately, that's what we have to do. Before I go back to you, I have a couple questions here. Monsieur Briard, go ahead. And then
Yeah, I'm just wondering if, being that it's a different county road and traffic count and all that stuff, the one in Rockland, like I said, is it very much different from this one here? Because again, it seems like me, from my perspective, the law or the rule was put in place for traffic, and again, if you want to make, let's say it does go to the tribunal, well, there is differences between the two cases that this may pass where the other one didn't. So again, I just wanted a further explanation as the rationale behind it. If it is only about traffic and keeping our roads preserved, then I think we all have a deep understanding there's a minimal impact on this case here. And if they were to take this case, being that there is differences from the one in Rockland to this one here, maybe it isn't just about frontage. There may be other factors at play here that tribunal would say, no, this one's okay versus the other one that wasn't.
Monsieur Prévost.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Briard, basically, as I mentioned earlier, there was an extensive exercise that was done through the county official plan where we basically looked at, or Mr. Bouchard's department looked at every county road. Some were targeted to be, basically major collectors and minor collectors. On major collectors, you're not allowed new consent for residential purposes, and on minor collector, the 100-meter was put forward. With regards to the tribunal, it makes no difference. I mean, it's the same situation as in Clarence Rockland. In the official plan, it basically states 100 meters, so there's no ifs and buts. You either conform or you don't. So. And I explained to Mr. Lyons, I appreciate the presentation that he made and everything, but with regards to planning, it's irrelevant. You either conform or you don't. It's as simple as that.
Merci, Monsieur Prévost. Monsieur Riopel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will support the official plan as it is because Mr. Prévost says, we do intensive work. We spend a lot of time, and a lot of the regions are really looked at. And I'll stand by the official plan. Sorry, but the way it is.
Merci beaucoup. Mr. Lyons, I'll let you conclude.
Thank you. I would not appeal for a change to the official plan, but I thought that the notion was some form of acceptance in particular cases to the official plan, minor variance or whatever the expression is. And I guess I would ask the question, under what circumstances ever would an acceptance be granted? You know, if it's a matter
Sorry,
of
do you
fact-
mean exception?
Yes.
Okay,
exception,
sorry.
yes,
No,
yeah.
I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about the
No,
language.
that's okay. I can, I'll go with Monsieur Prévost to answer your question if you want.
Oh, sure, thank
Yeah.
you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, to answer your question, Mr. Lyons, unless county council modifies the official plan to basically lower the frontage required for the creation of new lots on county roads, on this specific county road, then, I mean, there's no exception to be given. It's, you conform or you don't. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Monsieur Prévost. Go ahead.
If I was to get 50 meters from my brother next door, how deep of would I have to get? Would 1 meter, 50 by 1 meter, meet the recommendation?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bradley, that's an excellent question, and we had discussions with Mr. Lyons to that effect. If he were to get additional frontage from the neighboring property, a 1 meter width would probably not be sufficient because the lot needs to be, how should I say this, we don't want any sort of type of lot fabric in the area. So a proper width to be able to build a house would probably be more appropriate for this. We would need to negotiate something, but if you were able to secure additional frontage to basically meet the requirements for 200-meter lots, then we definitely could look at it in a more serious matter.
Yep. Follow up.
So as long as we had 100 meters each of frontage, there's sufficient area further back to build a home. Would that not qualify at that point, or?
I just want to, before I go to that, I realized earlier that I made a mistake when I said 200. I meant 100. My apologies. So just I heard it afterwards. I was like, wait, that's not right. If you can go ahead and answer his question, please.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Bradley, I mean, it's all, you can come up with a situation, a proposal, and then we'll definitely seriously look at it. So as I explained to Mr. Lyons earlier in our previous discussion, so we're not, I mean, in situations like this, it's, we have a job to do, and sometimes it's difficult to say no. I mean, according to some council members, I always say no, but I mean, the situation dictates that I cannot say yes to you today. However, if we can come up with an alternative where you can meet the county official plan, then we're definitely open to discussions.
Merci, Monsieur Prévost. Are you in a hurry?
Oh.
What's your timeline of,
am I in a hurry?
not today, I'm talking about like on doing whatever you need to do.
Yes, I know Matthew's been hoping that maybe he could initiate construction next summer. But, so I guess relatively speaking, that's hurried, but
I think for now, you know, we've already have one member saying that he would just unfortunately reject this application and accept to follow the official plan. I think this council needs to look at if they want to permit these types of things, to just simply review the official plan, amend it, and then at that point, if council chooses and passes the amendment, then we'd be in touch at that point and something, you know, a new application could be submitted. Am I going in the right direction? Perfect. One last comment, and then we have to wrap up. Go ahead.
yes, one last comment. When I asked the question about under what circumstances might an exception be granted, with respect, and I genuinely mean that, Mr. Prévost, you've been very, very kind and professional in our dealings, but your answer if we were to look at it, is that there are no exceptions. And so it really didn't answer the question. I mean, I'm here to ask for an exception, and the long and the short of it is that what we're hearing is that there are no exceptions. So that seems a little odd to me.
Mr. Lyons, I think it's important to understand that these plans are approved by the province, and the province dictates exactly how this works, right? It's not just the United Counties of Prescott-Russell that follow these rules, it's every single upper tier that follow these rules with official plans. And so-
I understand, and I do genuinely mean with respect, but
I understand.
as I said, the notion of requesting an exception and hearing that, well, there are no exceptions is, it seems a bit of a dichotomy to me. But I genuinely appreciate your understanding, your, seems to me, genuine interest to support what we're trying to do, and willingness to look at whatever options be available to do that, if there
I
are
understand.
indeed any options. So thank you very much.
There are a few options. We'll have a conversation. I think if there's willingness to change or amend the official plan, I think that we'll go in that route. But I'm fearful of changing an entire plan for one request, and that's something we're all going to have to look at, as in saying, and I think that goes into the question that Monsieur Brière asked: how many of these kinds of requests do we deny? Right. This is the first time that we've reintroduced this committee. It's been 2 years without it, so we don't know. And I think we'll check with the department to find out. But really, at this point, I think we're going to need to make a decision on this shortly. I'll give you the final closing comment, Monsieur Brière.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe I should clarify my answer for the exception. I indicated unless County Council modifies the official plan, there's also the possibility of Mr. Lyons applying for an official plan amendment to basically modify this policy. That's an option, and that would basically qualify as an exception that needs definitely to be approved by County Council. There is the possibility of Mr. Lyons putting forward an application.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. We have a mover to deny the request and stick with the official plan by Monsieur Riopel. Do I have a seconder? Monsieur Brière, all those in favor? Motion is denied, unfortunately for now. But the battle is not lost. As Monsieur Prévost has just mentioned, you do have a path forward into requesting an amendment to the official plan. And at that point, I'm sure that their team would be happy to work with you moving forward.
Once again, thank you very much. I appreciate your, what seems to me a genuine interest to try and solve the problem, and we'll move forward as best we can. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I believe now there's no closed meeting. There's no next, the next meeting will depend. So adjournment at 8:43, ajournement à 8h43. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.